This week, PlexTrac founder and CEO Dan DeCloss will be discussing the power of purple teaming. In the security news, defending against cleaning services, catastrophic mutating events in the future, myths and misconceptions, finding vulnerabilities in logs, and not log4j, SSRF leads to RCE with a POC, SQLI with XSS bypasses a WAF for the win. ThinkPad as a server, RPC directory traversal for the win, just directory traversal for the win. Paul gets a flipper 0, and he thinks he's some sort of hero. Shimmer your Chromebook, and superconductive magic angle graphene. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cybercriminals are hiding in the conversation. Cybercriminals use social engineering, loaded with urgency and fear, to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who's very excited for Diarrhea Awareness Week next week. Runs all week. Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It is episode number 771, recorded on February 1st, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pache.
Hey, I really butchered that intro.
Yeah, I feel like we needed some better. We needed more drinks before we started. We say cocktails flow steady. We just pour whiskey in a glass over ice. Like, we're really lazy about that.
Well, I mean, they used to be good cocktails, and we used to take the time, and we used to do beer,
right?
We used to do so much beer in various types that I went into a bar that had 280 different beers, and there were only 3 I hadn't tried.
Right.
Like,
it's a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Mr. Jeff Mann is with us. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, it's good to see you guys. I remember going to a beer bar years ago that had hundreds of beers, and I bellied up to the bar and I said, I'd like a Rogue Dead Guy Ale. And like, you can't get that east of the Mississippi. I'm like, sure I can. I had it last week in Baltimore. This was down in Richmond somewhere, and I got into this big fight. So I asked him for something else. I forget. And like, well, we don't have that either. I'm like, do you have Budweiser? He kind of kicked me out. Anyway, beer.
Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Hello, glad to be here with you. I think you need Kavanaugh for all this beer.
Yes. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Buenas noches.
Before we get into announcements, I promised my son Dean I'd give him a shout out on the show because he gets a kick out of it. So Dean scored 4 goals in his last soccer game.
Nice.
So trying not to let him get a big head about it and all, but he did. He played really well. So sort of the whole team, by the way.
What was the score of the game?
It was like 12-0, 12-1, something like that.
Oh, this is indoor soccer, right?
This is indoor, indoor soccer. No offsides either, which is interesting. Shorter field.
Oh yeah, not an indoor.
Yeah, so yeah, they're playing really well. They got like 3 more games left for this kind of interim season, so I'll keep you updated as to how they're doing. Let's see. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. And just do that because there's great stuff there. This segment is sponsored by PlexTrac, the premier penetration testing, reporting, collaboration, and management platform. You can visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrac and get a copy of PlexTrac to use free for 30 days. It's very generous of you, Dan. It's good. Please join me in welcoming PlexTrac founder and CEO Dan DeCloss to the show. Purple teaming exercises conducted regularly have the power to improve collaboration across teams, ensure issues are identified and remediated more proactively, and provide a means to measure progress over time. Dan joins us to discuss practical tips for getting started with purple teaming exercise and show off PlexTrac Runbooks. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks. And either you haven't had whiskey in a while or there's something else in that.
Right? Someone spiked my cocktail. My whiskey over ice.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
And so, I'm sorry, I fumbled over a lot of things in the intro to that show, so listeners, bear with us. It'll get better as the show progresses, maybe.
No, it won't.
No, it won't. Because I forgot to introduce Josh, because I can't see Josh. Where's Josh?
I'm right here, man. What's wrong with you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have you up on one of the monitors. We need to put Josh in the super source. Yeah, in the super source lower right, if we could put Josh, that'd be great. Then I can see him. Josh, welcome to the show. Sorry.
Why, thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yes. And so, Dan, we are all collectively going to talk about purple teaming and some of the new features that you're putting in your product. You've always been like a big, like your product, I feel like, has always kind of gone hand in hand with purple teaming. Where did purple teaming come from? I feel like back in the day we talked about red teaming versus pen testing versus vulnerability assessments. Like where did purple team come from?
Red informs blue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, back in the day, quote unquote, purple teaming really came from that concept of, collaborating between the red and the blue team for like specific exercises and specific assessments where, it was a kind of an adaptation of, rather than having the red team just go off or the pen testing team just go off and do their magic and get in and then write the report, and then 2 months later they actually get the results to the blue team and they maybe have a readout, and then the blue team takes those results and probably just puts them on a shelf and then maybe decides to fix one or two things. At least that used to happen back in the day for sure. So the concept of purple teaming was much more immediate feedback and education on both fronts, right? So the red team can learn what the struggles are of the blue team in real time, as well as the blue team can identify, hey, these are the things that the red team is actually doing, and are we seeing this as it's coming across the wire? So it's really geared for a much more collaborative, proactive assessment.
You mean mature collaborative proactive assessment? Because we've been doing collaborative assessments for a long time. Now we have a nice platform to integrate, do checklists, follow, and collaborate in a single platform. Because that was the hard part, right? Like you'd have to fly on site. You'd have to, maybe sometimes you could do video conferencing before we're good at video conferencing, COVID style. But the ability for red team and blue team to get along, set up the tests that needed to be done, follow the attack paths, and document all that, like those were things that were not occurring unless you're doing it very, very well in very mature organizations or as part of government tabletop exercises, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we maybe have matured, although I do have concerns. Like I was on a pen test once, and the person that I thought I was collaborating with was like secretly, but not so secretly, trying to get ahead of my pen test and patch and close off as much as they could.
No, that's not. No.
That's not a purple team.
No.
In many organizations, that is success. Let's be clear.
Yeah, true. I mean, coming out of it, the end result is like a whole bunch of stuff got patched, but that obviously wasn't built in the culture and the practice, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it has the possibility to go wrong, I guess I'm pointing out in my story. So, like, what do we do?
You shouldn't have to pay a couple tens of thousands of dollars to kick off your patching program.
Right.
The pen testers got to get in.
Yeah. I just liked the ones where I was on where, I was being escorted into certain facilities, right? And you're like doing some audit of like the firewall config or something, and you're like just telling them like, hey, by the way, this is a problem. I'm gonna write that up. He's like, oh, how do I fix that? Oh, you would just do this thing. So he goes and does it, and he's like, okay, it's fixed. Do you have to include that in the report? And like, yes,
very similar. Yeah. But what Dan and I just described is not what we would consider a purple team. Right?
That's not a purple team. team. Yeah, yeah, that's something different. But no, yeah, I mean, and purple teaming, has really matured and evolved, and like Tyler said, there was, it was kind of a more advanced and mature thing in organizations, and we're really trying to continue to bring it to the masses, right, and allow anybody to have a concept of how to do it, as well as the value that it provides, right. We've ran surveys, and we had a recent survey. I think even we produced some of the results on this show or one of your shows a while back. But of the people that do purple teaming in a continuous fashion, have definitely identified that it demonstrably improves the results and the velocity in which they improve their security program. 89% of those that did it, view it as very important to their security operations. And then that overall, 63% felt like it actually improved their security performance, right? And a wealth of other benefits in terms of having better capability to communicate effectiveness of their security controls to their stakeholders, which in turn led for justification for more resources and more budget. So all that fun stuff on the business side that you've got to you got to go fight for. But in addition, an improved sense of morale that both the red and the blue team collaborate better together. But especially from the blue team of like, hey, I actually know what's going on, and I can actually see that I'm making progress, right? And I think that's important, and it tends to get lost.
Does a pen test have to take place first traditionally before you transition to purple team? Like, I have a story, for an example, where this person found a parameterized...
Well, I was going to ask a broader question of that, Paul.
Yeah, but I was in the middle of asking
what is
question.
the perceived order, red team, blue team, purple team? Or blue team, red team, purple team? I just wanted to make sure that blue teaming was included.
All right,
Sorry.
Jeff, then Paul.
No, answer Paul's first with my fluff.
I couldn't... I was in the middle.
You have a story.
I'm now lost. Whose question am I asking?
Whose line is it anyway? So a story in my example for this week is there was a parameterized.
Let me ask my question then, Paul. Since you
parameterized SQL injection, and then they figured out that they could get cross-site scripting from that, and it took them time to develop the exploit. Like, is the blue team waiting around until I, as a penetration tester, like, find this exploit? Then I go to them like, hey, like, I found this thing, I proved that it works. Like, let's run it again and see if you test it. Because I think it would be hard to do that from the beginning and be like, hey, see if you see me kind of poking around, and I don't know if I'm going to find something. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Like, that seems like a bad way to start off a purple team, right?
Yeah, and I think there's certain things that are really kind of drawn out, and like what we'll show in our product that here in a little bit that I'll demo off is like, we have this Runbooks module that is really geared towards visualizing and seeing what test procedures are being executed and what command lines are being run. So in a scenario like that, Paul, it'd be like, hey, as part of our test plan, we're gonna test parameterized queries, and then you can build it out in real time and say like, okay, I've identified this parameter, in this URL or this query is potentially vulnerable. You document it right in front of them in the platform. Then you say like, hey, I executed, and here's the results, and then they can go look in their logs. So, and that's really the purpose or the intent is that it doesn't have to be where you're sitting at a table, right, and you're both doing this in real time. It can be like somewhat periodic, right? It's just meant to be a much more collaborative experience from the perspective of you're getting immediate feedback, and if you do want to be doing it in real time, you can facilitate that as well. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's a great
and
answer.
That also falls into the category of making sure that you've got an understanding of scoping and what the test is going to be, your rules of engagement as you're doing this. Are we going to, walk through the entire attack chain from initial access, where we script out all these MITRE techniques and we lay those out as part of the run book or the script that's going to be followed? Are we following the MITRE framework? Are we doing a PTES? Like, what is the goal of that? And when you lay that out and you have somewhere to actually document and follow those, so you're executing on each of the individual techniques, that full attack chain then becomes a whole engagement that is very strategically done. So you're getting good breadth and coverage, as well as identifying the gaps for the detection. Maybe you are detecting fine, but you've got a lack of visibility or response capability. And so each of those are able to be documented very clearly, as well as followed from the pen tester side, which is often where there's a lot of people running off doing their own thing. You've got a good plan there. So the runbooks really makes that easy, and you can script out those engagements so that they're well planned out and orchestrated.
Jeff, I believe your question was red team pen test vuln scan differences.
Oh wow!
No, my question is,
that's evil.
what in the evolution of a maturity process? I just put it up on the Discord, I think. What should come first for an organization that's kind of just getting started? Do they start with blue teaming? Do they start with red teaming? Do they start with purple teaming? What is the desirable evolutionary
Say it,
path?
Paul. It depends.
It depends.
And yes, he wears them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of good opinions and probably no wrong answer in terms. Well, I mean, maybe no right answer, but or like definitively right answer. But I think what organizations are naturally going to do is they're naturally going to start in a more blue teaming capability. Some of those traditional functions that they're going to set up, like vulnerability management. They're probably going to have some focus on some kind of reactive approach where it's, hey, we've set up a managed SOC, or we've outsourced that, or we've brought in a SIM and we have people analyzing those. And that's typically where organizations are going to start anyways, in terms of their security maturity. When it comes to more of the pen testing and the purple teaming capabilities, I think that there's arguments for anything, right? When I was a security director, we didn't have an internal red team. I was naturally more akin to knowing about red teaming and pen testing. So we and this is what I encourage folks to do, is like, we just started small and we're like, hey, we know we want to identify gaps in our environment in a periodic or continuous basis, without needing to go hire a pen testing firm every week to do testing on us. And so we genuinely did the pen and paper approach of kind of like what Tyler was mentioning, where we mapped out, okay, we think we have some gaps in these MITRE tactics and these techniques, right? And so we're going to spend 2 weeks and we're going to go, utilize MITRE or Atomic Red Team to actually say, like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to test. And we had technical people, just maybe not pen testers. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that you don't have to have the full skill set of a pen tester to execute some procedures and get started from a purple teaming perspective, because the goal is that you start doing it in a continuous basis where you're able to identify some of the gaps and quickly see what alerted, what didn't, do you have the forensic evidence, and then what do you need to go fix, and then test it again. So that's my argument for why you can get started with purple teaming right away. Pen testing, that's a whole different ballgame from a skill set perspective, right? And so we've seen organizations, obviously, that get pen tested quarterly from major service providers, major consulting firms, and then they also have their own internal pen testing team where they're doing all of those things and utilizing the purple teaming concept to kind of stay current in all of the potential new procedures that are getting executed or new threats that come out. I think at one point we talked about the concept of threat-informed pen testing, and we have several customers that utilize threat intelligence as part of their test plans within their pen testing program or purple teaming program. So it depends.
Yeah,
That was a long way of saying it.
It depends. Yeah, because
I think you would spend and waste a lot of money too if you don't get those ordered right, depending on your maturity model and there are use cases, very few, where you need a red team to get an impact statement for the executive top-down buy-in, because there's just not the buy-in for a security program at the moment. They don't see the need. They've checked the box. They've got antivirus. They're good to go. Those are the ones where you can bring in a red team or a pen test. But any other time, like if you're not going through
Tyler,
doing
by red team, we're still defining this as I don't want to call it a blind pen test or an uninformed pen test.
Objective-based, stealthy pen test that has very clear goals and objectives, and usually is over an extended period of time, usually is stealthy, and you can kind of argue the nuances between all those, but everybody kind of has their own idea of what red team is.
Yeah,
It
and
is,
there's different forms. Adversary emulation is a form of penetration testing, right? Where it's a month-long engagement, as an example, where I'm going to emulate adversaries that we see in the wild and see if we're going to detect. I mean, that's kind of similar to a directed pen test, or maybe even not so much a purple team, but it has the narrow
It's
kind
very
of
focused.
scope.
You
It's
can do it.
focused, yeah.
Yeah, but you could utilize the same techniques in a purple team engagement.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, and that's what you really want to do. You want, if you're a mature organization, I say 80% of organizations really need to get their vuln management program and their asset inventory figured out, so that they're not, you don't hire a pen test company, waste money, and I just tell you the things that your vuln scanner could have told you and build you a program that you should have had stood up anyway. Like, pen testers don't like to do that. That's a shit engagement.
Thank you for saying that out loud, Tyler.
Yeah, I like vulnerability scanning coupled with some breach and attack simulation that's automated to get you started, right? Because those are automated things. You can use software tools.
Tabletop it in the blue team. Your security team is smart enough to know a lot of the attacks and the things you should be doing. So if you've not gotten through that list of things of priority that a pen test is going to find, that's a waste of your money. You're going to either have to call those out of scope or have a different starting point or initialization for your pen test company. Otherwise, they're going to focus a bunch of time and money and resource on that particular thing, and that's not helping the organization get more secure. You already know about those. The goal of the pen test is to find the things you don't know about that aren't part of your vuln management program, that aren't part of your security roadmap over the next 5 years, and then highlight the risks of chained attacks with people, processes, and procedures, and then bring in a red team to kind of solidify that. Maybe after you've done remediation, you've walked through the process, done a purple team, gone through that, then the red team comes in and says, here's what we've missed. Here's the areas that we're not looking at. Here's how we can chain things to actually find vulnerabilities in the business process. That's typically how you should do.
It's interesting because at B-Sides Delaware and B-Sides Las Vegas, we run the Pros v. Joes CTF. And it's a red-blue team CTF. We have professional pen testers on the one side and then people trying to do blue team, amateur, some professional on the other side. The best way we found to do it is to put them in an environment where the red team just destroys them and then teaches them what they did and how they did it. So they literally spend half a day getting destroyed, the blue team. They spend a half a day learning what was done to them and how it was done and how they can prevent it. And then the next day, typically it's a 2 or 3 day engagement. They go back and they split it, half red team, half blue team working together, and half red team, half blue team on the other side. So, and then they swap halfway through the day. So everybody does offense, everybody does defense, everybody talks and collaborates and explains. And so it's not strictly purple teaming, forgive me, but I just wanted to point out there's a lot of ways to do this that are really, really valuable to teach blue teamers.
That sounds good
as well
for a
as
learning environment, though, Josh. I'm not sure that that's practical for a commercial entity to approach things that way.
Why not?
Well, I think it depends, right? I mean,
no, why not?
Oh, of course, everything depends. This is the depends episode.
Right.
That's a shitty thing to say, Jeff. Anyway, I couldn't resist.
I mean, if you're lower on the maturity scale, your defenders need to learn. But I've seen too often clients that's just sort of they teach to the test, they learn to the test. So their idea of okay, we fixed all the things that you found, we're done.
But we do it
Rather
on your
than
environment.
Introducing concepts and procedures.
That
and
is MITRE, right? Like that's MITRE technique numbers where you're trying to stop all of these TTPs and IOCs. Like that's BS. That's not doing good security. Like I'm going to get around that all day. Getting the behaviors right and fixing and making sure that you're maturing your security model and getting all of the best practices, the configuration, the hardening, all the dumb fundamental things that everyone knows they should be doing. Get those right rather than focus on TTPs and IOCs.
I absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. This is why we tend to do it on people's actual environments. And
so what immature companies
in
do
their
is
staging
send
environment or their
people
test
to-
environment, and their production environment doesn't get touched, but their staging environment or their test environment gets taken, destroyed. And so they learn where they need to do the fundamentals. They learn in something that is near and dear to them what they need to do.
Sorry, Dan, were you going to say something?
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, from a maturity perspective, I mean, there is the concept of being able to test against the known knowns, right? And that's where some of those TTPs can really become valuable. While they may not be able to extrapolate, like, okay, I've ran this command and I know that we can at least detect this, but how do they may not know exactly how a tester may adapt, that command or that set of commands or tactics to get around some of those initial defenses. But it does perform the objective of educating the blue team, like, that this exists and these are some of the things that we know we might have a gap around, right? I'm always of the opinion, like, the more visibility, the more information you have, the better, even if you don't understand all of the broader concepts that an attacker might utilize in your environment, right?
Yeah, I think it's all valid in the perspective of the blue team is experiencing this in some kind of controlled environment, whether it's a red team, purple team, breach and attack simulation, whatever it is. You don't want to experience this, although it is a good lesson, but it's a much harder lesson on a real incident, right? And I think that, blue teamers that have been around for a while and experienced more incidents like that, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have incidents, but you learn a lot from them. I think these exercises, however you want to slice them and dice them, provide you that experience, but in a controlled environment, right?
Muscle memory. You don't want to be practicing when you got an incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why we also emphasize that you take a programmatic approach to this, right? That it's not, hey, we're just doing this and that's the thing that we do, and that's all that we do, in terms of, like, hey, we're taking these TTPs or this, these test plans and just doing them on a continuous basis, and then we've got this warm fuzzy that we're all good. That's supplemental. I mean, that's a piece of the puzzle, right? So you're doing that. You're maybe doing some scanning or some automated pen test as a service type work. And then you're also hiring your outside service firms to do those more complicated, exposure. And it really can help you scope those exercises as well, because you're like, okay, well, we think we're pretty good here, but we'd love just like a deep dive and know, do we have deeper gaps? And that can really help inform how you're approaching your service providers of, like, scoping their engagements as well.
So, Dan, I like your product because it allows us to track all these activities regardless how we slice them and dice them, right? Yeah. And I think your product continues to evolve to handle more of these different style pen tests and more of these different kind of scenario-based things. So I think you said earlier you were working on, like, a new version of Runbooks. I'm assuming the goal is to support a lot of this activity, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, I'm happy to dive into some demo if that helps, because I think that, we were mentioned before, it's probably been a while since the user audience, the listeners in the audience have seen PlexTrac if you're not a user of it. But yeah, so a while ago we launched the concept, and let me make sure I can get my screen shared out here. We launched the concept of Runbooks, and then got a lot of good feedback from users. And Runbooks being the whole kind of purple teaming concept, but also serving different purposes of, like, having a distinct test plan and a methodology. Hey, this is a checklist of everything our testers they have to cover. It could be multi-use, right? And even facilitating tabletops. Got a lot of feedback, lot of good user feedback and things like that. And so we're launching our V2 version of Runbooks that I'll show off. But along with that, we've had a lot of improvements to the platform, and even just can remind folks of what we do. But at the end of the day, we help security teams tell stories, right? We help them show what they did in a test, help them write their reports more effectively and efficiently, collaborate on those engagements and the reports, and also the tracking and remediation of the findings that come out of it all in one place, right? That's what we do. And so one of the improvements that I'll kind of highlight as we've continued to progress and are getting ready to launch Runbooks V2, which is next week. It's a week from today on the 7th. And then we're also doing a joint webinar with some of our friends over at OnDefend. They have a really slick integration into our Runbooks module and can help facilitate threat-informed pen testing. So our webinar on the 8th is actually about that. So I'll just kind of promote that as well. Come join us. But So we have this concept now in Runbooks v2 around the test plans, right? Where a test plan is like, hey, these are the things that we're going to execute. It comes kind of built. It does have all the MITRE TTPs built into it, and it comes with like a default test plan. But you can create your own, right? And you can create your own content and everything around that. And so when we talk about like, I'll just kind of show you. Here's the base test plan that is something to get started. So like these are some TTPs. Here's how many they are with. Here's the coverage of the TTPs that you're going to be executing within the different categories, right? And so you kind of just get a little bit of a view of the TTPs and things like that. So you could start a new engagement straight from this. So an engagement is an actual execution of the test plan. But before I go there, I'll kind of talk about our content library, which has really drastically improved. And we now have the concept of, we've always had the concept of write-ups database where, hey, these are the common findings that people are going to utilize in their practice, right? Hey, this is how we consistently write up SQL injection and whatnot. So Runbooks DB is really the concept of repositories around the TTPs, right? So you might have a repository strictly dedicated to MITRE. You might have a repository strictly dedicated to PTAS or OWASP, right? And you can have your own set of procedures that you're going to execute within those, right? And that's really the concept here. I won't spend too much time, but it facilitates access to those different repositories and just how you want to stay consistent within maybe your different types of assessments.
Hey, Dan,
but that's a really good enhancement. Yeah.
Does PlexTrac come with some of these runbooks and repositories like already built in for like the defined frameworks like MITRE, for example?
Yes, exactly. And so like what you're seeing here is what you get out of the box, right? So I'll be honest, like I'm tempting the demo gods here in that I started from a clean slate just to kind of get like everyone's perspective of like what it would look like when you start. So yeah, so we have this curated list of TTPs, but they're all based on MITRE, right? And so you can see that we have it based on 11.3 and 9.0, right? So if you some groups, hey, we've got to do everything at 9, and then they have like regimented approach to when they upgrade. So you can filter that based on that. But yeah, so this is all the MITRE stuff, and also by the way, this is also utilizing distinct procedure execution steps from Atomic Red Team, right, as well. So that's what comes in it. And then you can create your own, and you can even modify these or add new. You can do whatever you want, right? But you do have some way to get started, right? Which is a common thing. Like if you come in here, you do have a basic test plan that it comes with, right? And so that's what I showed you at the beginning. Like this comes out of the box. So if you're like, I don't know where to get started, well, we've kind of given you some things like, hey, this is a good starting point. It's got 13 procedures. Technically shouldn't take more than a couple hours to execute if you're new. So then we'll just start an engagement, right? So we're starting from an existing test plan. We've got this one selected. If we had multiple test plans, we could have the options there, and then you can describe what we're doing here, right? So you can have some descriptions. You can also add tags. Lots of things. Let's say it's related to PCI for Jeff here, right? So then these are all the procedures that are going to be in the test plan, right? So you may start from a baseline. You may add some more for this specific engagement. Or you may just want to subtract some. So the goal is that there's a lot of flexibility here, and you can see what all you're going to be able to do. So then we just add it, and so now we have the view of like, here's the coverage that we're going to get through this engagement, and we go ahead and create the engagement. And now we have these are all the things that are going to get going, and this is kind of the meat and the potatoes of the purple team exercise, right? So you have a column here for the red team outcome and a column here for the blue team outcome. If we come in here and view the actual procedure, this is the description. This is what's going to get executed. So the red team can go in and they're going to say like, hey, I'm going to execute this. I can put in, the attack source, like where I'm coming from if I want to. I can indicate whether that procedure that was executed was successful. The blue team, they can come in and say like, okay, well, we didn't detect it, but we did log it, right? And I executed that one execution step. You can have multiple execution steps. I actually don't have any assets listed in the environment right now, but if you had assets, you could do it at the asset level as well. So, and then we have some
Dan,
flexibility around.
If you don't have any assets, you don't have any vulnerabilities, which means you're ultra secure, right?
Secure.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but we can't add an asset on the fly, right? So I can create or pull in from an existing. But once you have the asset in there, you can specify at the asset level whether you executed this procedure at that asset and whether it was detected or not, right? And whether it was successful. You can add procedure logs and like, hey, these were the timestamps of when things were done, say on both red and blue. So like you could start to see, are we lining up on like, hey, here's when the red team says that they did it. Here's what we saw in the evidence, and we can document that. So that's all part of our documentation capabilities. If you wanted to add any attachments like screenshots or anything like that, you could bring those in here, and then just any generic notes, right, that you might have on both sides, right? So we list out which tactics and techniques are getting covered, under this procedure, and we can also say like, hey, this is in progress. We might want to identify an operator. I only have one user in here, so I can't.
Tyler's not in
specify
there?
My what's that?
Tyler's not in there? Sorry.
I should have added Tyler. Yeah. He's getting in there right now.
I'm in prod.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So this is fun because then when you come back, oops, I need to save it first. And then, when you come back, to the overall view, you can kind of start to get an idea of how we're progressing, and that, hey, the red team has logged this as partially successful. The blue team says that it was forensically logged. If we wanted to come back in, we could say, okay, everything's done here. And by the way, we do consider this to be a finding, right? So that will make itself as a finding back in when we complete the report or the engagement. We can, we'll have a finding that actually gets listed with recommendations for remediation. So as we progress through, you can make all these kinds of comments. You could add procedures on the fly. So like say, okay, now that I've gotten this far and this thing actually was successful, I might want to add a whole nother set of procedures because it's expanding, right? Which is very common, right? And so we've provided all that capability. You can see our progress through it. The nice thing is we can always submit the engagement, and once we submit the engagement, it's kind of closing that portion of it off, but then it gets into the reporting phase, right? And so the nice thing that the tie between our what our core product is around reporting and reporting of your engagements is that when an engagement or when a report has been created from a run book, you actually get to see all the procedures that were executed, and you have that data available to you that really adds to the report, right? Because it's one thing to just say like, okay, remember we just had that one item that we listed as a finding, so that's all we're going to see here, which is the finding and the details, and you can go in and then edit everything like normal in normal PlexTrac. But we also have the list of procedures that were executed. So this adds to the story, right? And I think that's a really important aspect, is to be able to paint the story of like, hey, yeah, we may have had a couple critical findings, but here's all the other things that we did, right? And here's how you stacked up against those, right? And I think that's a really important piece of the narrative, right? So then we're back to our standard reporting capability within PlexTrac. But for those that are need a little bit of a refresher or maybe haven't seen it before, here's where you can manage your entire report on the back end. And then once it's actually published or delivered, then the blue team can actually come in and say like, hey, okay, well, we're going to go fix this, right? And we're going to figure it out. And stuff like that. So you have the holistic experience right here in PlexTrac, where you start from soup to nuts. You define what you're going to test, you execute the test, you collaborate during that portion of the engagement. Then the red team goes and submits the engagement. They finalize their report, publish the findings, and the blue team can come in and track and remediate. So that's the efficiency gain. That's the value that we provide. That's how we help paint the picture of how you're getting better. Really quick, you kind of run through of Runbooks in our enhancements. But for those that haven't used that used our old version of Runbooks, which is, you can see here, definitely a lot of improvements, right? In terms of how to manage, how to navigate, how to consistently go to report. And now you can see also we have the view of like, this was the last, this is the list of engagements that were either in process or are completed. So I'll pause there. I don't know if there were any questions.
I do, Dan. How specific or not specific can you be on like a run book and things like that? Because I feel like if I were to go do a pen test and I had to describe like everything I thought I might do as part of like the run book, which I don't think in some cases is a bad thing, but it kind of, on the flip side of that, it can kind of like spoil some of the creativity and explorations you might have on a pen test. Or is there room to kind of accommodate that, even if I describe it in some detail?
Oh yeah, let's just start it again. Let's just do the same one again, which is also nice because you have a frame. You have a frame of reference of like, this was what I tested a week ago or yesterday, and I'm going to go and do the exact same things, or I'm going to do something similar, right? So we'll just get going here. So the nice thing, so these were the procedures, but let's say we wanted to add a procedure. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I got to go back to the content library. I apologize. So back in the content library. So if we come in here, I can add maybe a procedure right here. So this is where it can be as generic or as specific as you want it to be, right? So like, Paul's, what was it? The flipper?
Multifunction printer firmware exploitation.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my exploit on that.
I'm still working on that, buddy.
Thanks, man. Look at me demanding exploit. If you got an exploit, send them to me.
Yeah. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. Let's see. Maybe if I type it in, you would assign it to a repository, and I thought I was in that repository. But anyway, regardless, you can keep it as specific or as generic as you need it to be. So even if it's just like a placeholder for like, hey, we're going to test these things, but we're not going to like list out every single technique, right? But then maybe we want to actually document that later. You can come back in, right, and you can edit it in the engagement itself, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
So you opened the door on PCI.
I knew it. I knew it.
When did that happen? Did he really?
Jesus.
Or are you just saying
No,
that?
he did.
It took him 42 minutes to get there.
I tried to defer, but it occurred to me, I've been working on a couple projects the last couple of weeks on version 4 of PCI, which was released last year and comes fully in force technically next year. But given that a PCI assessment's looking back 12 months, you need to start doing PCI soon, let's say. And it occurred to me, PCI has sort of revamped and updated a lot of things. The penetration testing requirement is more or less still the same, but it occurred to me there's no mention of red teaming in the PCI standard at all. They talk about pen testing, and they define pen testing as a high, and I'm paraphrasing grossly here, a highly manual process that focuses on exploitation of vulnerabilities, not discovery of vulnerabilities. And then I was thinking, I am getting to a question, Dan, here soon. Then I was thinking, a lot of my clients, they have a defense, so there's blue teaming going on, whether they call it that or not. Most of my clients in the PCI land, and most of the ones that my practice have, they don't necessarily do their own pen testing. They hire out for someone to do a pen test. Does any of do you have a way of using your product, with a pen testing company, red teaming company that then is collaborating with a client's blue team, and so you can do the purpling, but it's sort of between a company and a client type of relationship?
Yep, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really how PlexTrac is designed. It's designed for that either internal collaboration or service providers using PlexTrac as a portal for their engagements with their external customers, right? So say pick Tyler, who you with now, right? You do Trimark now still, or maybe we're not supposed to say. But say like Tyler's got his own company, right? And he's testing for a bunch of clients. You can use here. I'll kind of show a little bit here too, but like you can in PlexTrac, you can have clients, and then they have. I gotta hide the window here. Sorry. If you come into the client itself, you can see who has access, right? So you can grant access to your external clients, and they can come in and manage their own results. So it really does facilitate that consultant to enterprise level relationship, as well as like an internal pen test team to the rest of their organization. So customers of ours use it in both ways, right? As a client facing portal. Right? Or vice versa. Yeah, exactly. So, like a larger enterprise would be like, hey, Tyler, we're PlexTrac users. Can you just write, we'll grant you access, to our instance, and you can write your report, or we can do our engagement in our instance. Meanwhile, Tyler could still export his deliverable out, if he needed to save it in for, just for reference or whatnot. So we really do help facilitate that relationship.
So I assume you have clients that have clients that are PCI clients, subject to PCI. I'm curious, in as much as the concept of red teaming is not in the PCI standard at all, how do you approach companies that are more attuned to thinking about pen testing and present the idea of red teaming, to get to the end of purple team? Maybe the question is, how do you introduce the idea of purple teaming? Do you just call it collaboration, or do you have some, what's your clever elevator pitch?
What's the difference?
Yeah, my clever elevator pitch is like continuous assessment, right? I mean, because I really view where we continue to push people from a purple teaming concept is really that this is meant to be small chunks in a continuous fashion, right? That you can continuously test in an iterative process. So that's how we will really approach organizations that may are just trying to get started or aren't sure where to get started, because then that starts to open the door towards more depth around pen testing that leads to deeper red team engagements.
I like this notion, Dan, because I think that traditional pen testing and vuln scanning suffer from one of the same problems, and that is at the end you end up with a really big report with a whole bunch of stuff in it, and whether you have ADD or not, you're overwhelmed by that as a blue team. And I liked the borrowing from the concept from DevOps of breaking work down into smaller chunks, and I think your platform, coupled with the different styles of testing, if you will, that can break these tasks or subgroups in this type of testing into smaller chunks so you can address them and just be continuous about it. I think that's a thing. I think there's also probably a talk in there about comparing the different styles of pen test to different styles of martial arts. Now that I think about it, like that'd be a really cool talk. Someone should do that talk. That's really cool.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that's one of our goals has always been to help aggregate all the different results from those types of engagements so that it's not disparate, right? And if I've hired 4 or 5 different consulting firms over the last 4 or 5 years, I don't have 4 different types of reports. I have all of them in one place where we've tracked and we've managed and we reported, and we've added in our vuln scans. I'm not doing a full demo of PlexTrac, but we can bring in vulnerability scan results. We do integrate with a lot of PTAS or pen test as a service platforms as well. And like I mentioned, our friends at OnDefend have a great integration with their product as well that we're going to be demoing next week. So we really do help facilitate all of the different types of activities that unfortunately, some people do call vuln scanning pen testing, right? I think we all know that. So, but regardless of where the source is, we're trying to bring it in, helping everybody have visibility as to what what their true priorities need to be, where are we at in terms of fixing it, in addition to helping improve the lives of the tester by, speeding up the reporting cycle, and, helping on the collaboration side. Because I think, for testers that are worth their salt, they actually want to help the customer get better. And so they're going to get that question, right? Like, hey, I can't reproduce this, or I can't fix this, or I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And a good tester is going to engage in that. And that's, you want to keep that track record and that history as well. And that's the whole goal of PlexTrac.
Mm. Any questions for Dan?
What else is new, Dan? Like Runbooks V2 is like exciting already. I'm pretty stoked about that. What else are you doing over there?
Yeah. Well, and I kind of showed it a little bit, but I maybe I'll highlight it. So if you are familiar with, if you are familiar with PlexTrac, you or haven't seen it in a while, you may not. You may know like that we're definitely geared towards helping folks tell the right stories. And so as part of that, within a report, you have the concept of the introductory sections or the narratives, right? And so that's what we call the narratives. And so we've really expanded the capabilities of our content library. So you have the notion of repositories for different types of narratives that come around. So like if you want some standard narratives around, here's our methodology for XYZ type of test, really anything that you do in a standard reporting fashion, and you want repeatable content that you can take in really quickly into the report and be able to then edit it quickly. That's the notion of what these databases are for. Similar to a Runbooks database. Hey, I want to quickly collect a bunch of procedures and create a runbook test plan out of it. But we also have added narratives DB so that you can have a lot of different sections that you would bring into a standard report. And with that upgrade, we did introduce the concept of repositories for write-ups themselves, because we got a lot of feedback in terms of, hey, I have 1,000 different write-ups, based on the different types of engagements that we do. But I only want the red team to have access to these findings or these write-ups, whereas I want the AppSec team to have access to these write-ups. And we didn't have a great way outside of tagging to really, isolate those. And it's one thing to have access to them, but there definitely been customers where it's like, no, we don't want anybody to have access to those. And also we want restrictions around who can edit them and all those kinds of things. Some of that, all the fun stuff around our back, right? And so that's really another enhancement that we've done, is we've added the concept of repositories where you can have different repositories of different types of write-ups, and then you can manage the level of access that people will have within each one. And so that's just continued enhancement around just the capability of getting content in quickly, being able to edit it and produce a report right away. We're constantly adding new integrations. HackerOne and Sneak are integrations that we have from an automated perspective. We've got a couple more coming, and then naturally we have integrations on the PTAS side, like Pantera, Blind Spot from OnDefend, Scythe, all of those fun tools as well. So
you haven't even touched on analytics yet. There's analytics.
I haven't touched on analytics, and this is where I feel badly, because we've got a lot of cool analytics, but I started with a clean slate on this demo. This is my bad. Yes, we have a lot of really cool analytics and a lot more coming. I would say one of the bigger ones that's very, very popular is the concept of trends and SLAs, right? And so being able to see how setting some of your own SLAs, whether that's on behalf of a client or internally, like, hey, anytime a critical finding gets reported, we are putting a 48-hour SLA on that, and then you actually can see, are we trending in the right direction in terms of consistently closing these out in time. Also, this is great, Jeff, for you. We have PCI clients where it's like, I want to tag all the assets that are within the PCI CDE, and I'm going to set SLAs specifically for those types of assets that are tagged in that fashion. And then I can come here and I can see, like, okay, are my PCI related assets what's the status of those versus everything else, right? And so really continuing to hone how do we not only report on these findings efficiently and effectively, but how do we get the data together to continue to paint the story of how we're getting better, right?
So that begs the question, Dave.
So imagine pretty graphs here. Yeah.
It's become very popular these days, even though segmentation is still not required in PCI, but it's certainly highly, highly desirable because companies have figured out, if I can isolate certain systems that are the PCI systems, this is my paraphrase, I don't have to do all that security stuff to everything else. But in theory, PCI zones, which are called cardholder data environments, to use the PCI vernacular, are isolated and protected and not easily accessible from other parts of your network. How do you guys get to them, or how do you account for that in terms of your reporting? Do you have to drop agents in, or set up whitelists, or how do you get data out of areas that are supposedly you're not supposed to be able to get to?
Good question. I think that also is a good clarification that we don't do the scanning, right? We don't have agents. We are the data collection point. So a PCI tester would be inserting their data into PlexTrac, so we don't need access to anything, right? Outside of, the tools that might be the API integrations that we have, like with, from an automated perspective. So in that regard, the tester or the tool that they're bringing that scan data in, they will either tag those findings that have assets related to PCI. They will tag them or categorize the assets within PlexTrac that then feeds into the analytics module for filtering, right?
Can I auto tag? Can I say everything within this IP range is PCI?
Oh, and you can import scans too. So those integrations are important.
Yeah. I'll deviate from my script, which is probably a bad thing. But so if we were to come into this report, right? So this was this was the report that we created from the run book, right? So, but let's say I also want to add in. Let's say I'm also just doing some other stuff, or I also want to add in findings from a scanner, right? So here we have automated scanners, and then we also have static parsers, right? So static, if you want to add in a static file. So these are all the tools that we have today, and this list continues to grow. But let's say I bring in a Qualys scan, and I don't have one on hand. But if I was able to get past this screen and go to this one where it's select tags and upload, I can bulk tag any asset that's coming in. So if I knew this was a scan specifically within a PCI CDE, I can tag it however I want to be able to distinguish that, right? But then also you can do that after the fact too, right? You can always come in and add your own tags, either at the finding level. So down here we have tags, or at the asset level. If we had added an asset, you can. That's another cool thing. I should have been much more prepared. I was only prepared to show. I was really only prepared to show runbooks, but on this is another really. It's simple but really really cool and very valuable to our customers. You know how you might want just to paste in a list of assets, you can do that here. So if you had say you had an Nmap file or something, we can import Nmap. But if you had just a text file of here's the scope of the assets I'm scanning, you could paste those in here, and it would immediately create. Well, you run through a process to create those automatically. So it really speeds up the process of getting asset data into PlexTrac if it's not coming from a scan file.
And I see the add tags process at the end of that, the tag at the end of that process. So I can paste in my entire PCI CDE, and then when I get to the add tags part, boom, I just tag them as PCI CDE. Life is good. We're done. Next.
Yep.
That's nice.
So let's just say I had pasted in a bunch. I'm just adding one, but then right. And so it parses that, parses the text to kind of say hey, in Nmap you've got the graphable format. It would parse that out, so then you can kind of say hey, is this a chained asset or whatnot? So you can do all of that, and then you can say I think I even got so then I could tag that as PCI, and now I've got that asset added in, right? And so from here within the report I can see the asset information, those kinds of things. So So a lot more flexibility that we've been adding in around how to manage your assets and related to findings and things like that. We did add an attack path as well to where if I had more than one finding, I can kind of do a drag and drop here, which is fun. So lots of
how will that
cool
come
stuff
out on the report? Will that come out as a graphic on the report?
That it will not. Yeah. So you got to stay in platform to see this. I believe that is in the works, but yeah, we're, I'll be part of our secret sauce is we're trying to continue to keep people engaged in the platform. Obviously we can do custom templating and get your document the way you do it today if you write it out. But there are some capabilities in PlexTrac right now that we didn't, as part of the initial launch of these features, we didn't add them into the document export. But I do believe this one is on the roadmap. I cannot tell you when, but yeah.
Okay, I apologize. I know I'm asking a lot, but to be so that implies that in your system you have an auditor read-only capability, so that I can send an auditor a login. They can go through all the stuff in platform in read-only mode and be able to go through everything and see everything they need.
Yep, absolutely. So if I had more than one user, I could add user to that client, and then I can have different roles, right? So these are like out of the box roles, but you can have custom roles set up for whatever you want. So if we were to come over to actually, I'm not going to do that right now because I think there's some other users in here that we're not allowed to.
Sorry, no, don't, I get the idea.
Imagine,
you can do read-only roles, and that works so you can stay in platform and give them access to the rich content that's inside the platform without having to format and print out a report. You can actually, and they can comment on that in the platform potentially, so that you can go back and forth and collaborate even with your auditors. It's not bad.
Yep, exactly. And that's the whole idea of the status tracker is like you in platform, you can specify like, hey, I might need more evidence. I might, I don't know how to repeat this, or I've fixed it, and you can even create substatuses, right? Of like, hey, it's in process, validated, or, you're retesting and those kinds of things. So it really facilitates the entire workflow. And that's really why we really encourage you to stay in platform, is that once it's a document, that's what we consider an artifact of the engagement. It's a point in time export. It's going to look great, and it's going to still provide all the information but there's not much you can do with it outside of that, right? So
this is good. This is really nice.
Dan, I know we're running short on time, but I did have a question for you. In all of the different ways you can use the PlexTrac platform to integrate results, however you're getting those and funnel those to the blue team, do you find that blue teams feel overwhelmed? Or I think we've talked about features before that kind of help them, like it's maybe not going all to the same team, that you're compartmentalizing it and prioritizing it, right? Like I don't want the blue teams to feel overwhelmed, because then we have this great like I can take all my scan data, all my pen tests, where they're coming from, breach and attack simulation, funnel it all through here, and the blue team ends up with a list a mile long.
I mean, good question. I think if they, I would say the blue team already is overwhelmed, and that's what we're trying to facilitate is helping them feel less overwhelmed, right? Is that I don't want to go to 10 different platforms or even like a couple different just to get data and try and provide a view of what we're working on and what I should be working on. Is that when you can consolidate and aggregate that, it really speeds up the life cycle. That's one other feature that I didn't show, but and I know we're running low on time. So, but we also have this capability of like consolidating using the write-ups database. So like, my Vuln scanner may have 100 or 500, SSL findings, and I really only want those to consolidate into one. I still want all the information about it, but I want to just consolidate that into one finding, and I'm going to go assign it to Bill over in IT that can fix the cert problem or whatever, right? So he only gets one ticket as opposed to 1,000.
Right. No, it's awesome.
Dan, I know you've covered this before, but the question came up on the Discord. So we're dumping all sorts of potentially very sensitive data out on your site. How are you protecting all this data?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've been really conscientious of from day one, obviously. One, the nice thing about one, we are a security company, so we do our own testing. We have security baked into our SDLC. We have an internal AppSec team and pen testing team as well. I guess a team of 1.5, but still testing on a continuous basis internally. We are SOC 2 certified, and then we do get external security tests. As part of just our due diligence in terms of external assessments, and make sure we have a good process around all of those findings, and then we eat our own. Well, we drink our own champagne in terms of using the product to make sure that we are identifying findings that need to get.
That's the fancy
I
way
got
of
corrected
saying
on that the
eating
other
your
day.
own dog food, huh?
Yeah. It's really high-end dog food.
So,
or champagne is a way better analogy. Yeah. You need a funny answer to that, too.
Yeah.
It's like we employ a zero-trust architecture, and we use a lot of WAFs and threat intelligence feeds. And,
like AI and ML.
All the buzzwords.
And Bitcoin. But no, we do take it very seriously. And we have
that use PlexTrac to provide reports back to you.
You can.
No, like in your...
No,
I think he's just
the companies that you hire to test you, do you make them use PlexTrac to report to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do,
Definitely.
don't we, Tyler?
Yes.
Oh, it's great.
I love this system.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, for your free 30-day trial, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrac. Dan, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's wonderful having you as always.
Yeah, thank you. Always good to chat and good to see everybody. I appreciate the conversation.
See you, Dan.
Fantastic. With that,
Good to see you.
the security news coming up next. Stay tuned.